Okay, welcome to Northwest, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we are gathering this morning both virtually and in person as one connected church community. I'm Tom Ott, my pronouns are he and him, and I'm your worship leader for this morning's service. We, as the members of the Northwest Unitarian Universalist congregation, aspire to be a welcoming, diverse, multi-generational, and inclusive congregation. To this end, we endeavor to treat each other with respect, trust, kindness, and patience, foster expression of ideas, beliefs, values, identities, and experiences, to lift one another and the congregation as a whole, provide a supportive environment for all sharing hope on this journey, listen and learn together while caring for each other and the planet, build a fair, peaceful, and socially responsibility world. May we create a beloved community with a gentle heart and thoughtful ear, and maintain this community with our 8 Unitarian Universalist principles as our guide. This morning, we welcome back Pastor Joshua Berg, who is joining us from Southern California. He currently serves as a chaplain resident at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. We also have Alex Myers, our guest accompanist, leading our communal singing. Each month, we contemplate a theme using soul matters. This month, we are considering the concept of heritage. Today's message asks us to explore the question, how one of our most important UU changemakers, the Iowa Sisterhood, can motivate us to keep believing that the work we do matters and that radical change can happen. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box. If you're here with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. So now please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. Okay. We have a few announcements to share with you. More information about our events in the congregation are posted in the weekly newsletter and on our website, northwestuu.org. First, join us for coffee, tea, and light refreshments after the service in the multi-purpose room. Also after the service, Liz Buckner would like help writing postcards to Ohio voters, asking them to support the Reproductive Freedom Ballot Initiative. This is very similar to Prop 3 that Michiganders passed last year. She will have the postcards, scripts, and addresses. Next, join the Northwest Coven and Friends on Thursday, October 26th at 7 p.m. to celebrate the turning of the wheel of the year and the thinning of the veil between the worlds at Samhain. We will remember our ancestors who have gone before us and write letters in their honor. This ritual is open to all faiths and ages. Next, our next joint worship service will be held at the First UU Church in Detroit next Sunday, October 29th. Come build our collective ancestor altar by bringing a memento or photograph of an ancestor you cherish. This may be someone in your bloodline, from your culture or heritage, or a person from a place or tradition you belong to. You will get your mementos back at the end of the service. Then after the service, we will be celebrating heritage through food and dressing up for Halloween. So join us in the fellowship hall for Day of the Dead at crafts and activities. And the last announcement, it's now or never. Today is the deadline for submitting donations to our upcoming service auction. Look for the website address and QR code in the weekly announcements, or see us in the service auction information table after the service. At the website, you can donate items, services, or events. You can also register to bid on various items later this month. Finally, you can buy tickets to attend our service auction event on November 11th. So before we begin the prelude, let's all take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship.
This prelude is being offered in memory of Samantha Wells, a president of a Detroit synagogue who was murdered 2 days ago.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Oh, am I going to do it or you? Well, thank you, Alex, for that beautiful tribute. Samantha Wells was a member of Isaac Agree Synagogue downtown, right by the waterfront, in case anyone wants to support them. We begin our worship services with a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinaabeg, the Council of the Three Fires, which include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Bodewadmi, also known as Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. I'm in the Los Angeles area, and I sit on the traditional lands of the Chumash, the Tongva, and the Kizh. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. The chalice lighting words Tom, do you want to do the chalice lighting? It says your name. And you have the chalice there.
Yeah, we light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this land and around the world are doing the same. We do so with words from the Reverend Elizabeth M. Strong. Our Unitarian heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of freedom, in the light of reason, in actions of tolerance. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of freedom, reason, and tolerance. Our Universalist heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in actions, in light of hope, in actions of love. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of faith, hope, and love. Let us bring this Unitarian Universalist heritage into our world and our lives today.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Told me that I should find a story that was about heritage and about strong women. And I looked around for a kid's book, but I wasn't having a lot of luck, so I decided to give a reprise of a true story about my grandmother who inspired me and is in my heritage. And the title of this thing is called I Pulled the Lever for Richard Nixon in 1960. Now, that means I voted for Nixon, and I was only 4 years old, so how can that be? This is a story about my heritage and about the grandma that inspired me. So the first photo is my grandmother when she was 14 years old. Alice Nelson. She was born in 1894 and lived in Joliet, Illinois. About 1910, Alice's father was injured at work, and he hoped that the mineral baths in Mount Clemens would help him heal. So Alice and the entire family moved to Michigan, and there's a photo of them on the porch of their house about the time of the move. So that's the next one. And that's my grandmother's front and center on the steps, and that's all her many brothers and sisters and her parents. there's a funny story about that, which I can't get into right now, but I'll tell you after if you want. So they moved to Detroit, and the mineral baths must not have helped because the dad died shortly thereafter. So now there's my great-grandmother with four of the kids still living at home with her. And my grandmother was a go-getter. 15 years old, she's out getting jobs. She sold cloth at Kresge's store. She was in the millinery department. And then she worked as a stenographer and actually took dictation from Sebastian S. Kresge. The SS Kresge was one of her bosses, and she took dictation from him. So the next photo is my great-grandmother, Matilda. She was the head of household now, and they lived on McGraw Avenue in Detroit. My grandma Alice lived with them, her sister Selma, and her sister Lily. We got a picture of Lily also, beautiful woman, never married, and was the favorite aunt of my mother and her sisters. Next one is Aunt Lily. So Lily and Grandma both worked at Michigan Central Station as switchboard operators, pulling the plugs and connecting people up to their phones and stuff. And there's more to that. That's an important thing. So all four of these women are working and paying their rent and paying taxes, but none of them were allowed to vote. Women were not given the right to vote in federal elections till late in 1919. So they had to really wait until the 1920 election before they could vote, even though they were part of the whole economy and doing everything that the men did. So Lily and Grandma are working at the switchboard at the Central Station, and the woman manager there introduced my grandmother to a gentleman named Ed Clay, which we have a photo of him too. That's my grandpa Edward Clay and my grandma Alice. He worked as a route manager for a seed company, and so he knew the people at the station, and they hooked him up, and they got married in 1921. And they moved to, they got married in November 2020, and they moved to Dearborn, where Ed's hometown. So shortly after that, Alice begins voting, and it's pretty cool. The next picture is the voter registration book. It's just an enormous book they have in the city archives, and they have the names there with signatures of all the voters. And my grandmother, the next slide shows a close-up. My grandmother was at the bottom of that page, and her signature's right there. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was so cool. Turns out she voted almost every chance she could all the way through 1921. And from then on, she was a strong voter. So my mother came along shortly after that, and the rest is history. My grandparents never talked about who they voted for, but there was plenty of evidence that they were preferred Republicans. So now, a more up-to-date photo of my grandmother. This was when she was about 80 years old, kind of how she looked. My grandmother in 1960 took me to the library to vote with her. And I still remember that made a huge impression. You had to go in this little voting machine, and we have a picture of how they used to look inside. Probably some of you remember this. There was little buttons or switches. You had to pick which candidate you wanted to vote for each office. And when you were all done, you pulled the red lever, and that would record your vote. So once all the selections were made, Grandma let me pull that lever. So I can truthfully say that I pulled the lever for Richard Nixon in 1960. My grandma set a huge example of being informed and participating, and I never forgot that trip to the voting booth, and I never forgot her example, so I seldom miss a chance to vote. But I also know that even though this story started more than 100 years ago, voting still isn't accessible and fair to everybody. So we still have to keep working for a stronger democracy. And that's the story of my voting for Richard Nixon. Classrooms and our huge crowd of children here, I think Jake is going to carry the chalice for us because that's the only kid I see that's in here right now. Okay, so we're not going to need to carry the flame. That'll leave us more time for the sermon and stuff.
No, thank you. Oh. Yeah, okay. Are we still going to play the? Okay. I'll just go on to the. This is what we're doing, isn't it? Yes. Well, okay, you'll sing. We're going to sing.
Although I just closed out the tab with it on, so give me a second. I didn't have my sheet music with me today. Okay. May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
Thank you, my God. Okay.
All right, one purpose of a religious community is to encourage all who gather together to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will mutually support this self-supporting congregation and the shared plate recipient. Each month, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collections with a local 501c3 charity organization. The Social Justice Committee has selected the Lighthouse of Oakland County as our October shared plate recipient. Lighthouse endeavors to build equitable communities that alleviate poverty in partnership with and in service to individuals, families, and organizations. You can do so in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen. And for those of us here in person, we are passing a collection basket for checks and cash. We now take a few minutes to share with the community those things which are in our hearts. I invite you to consider if this is something you want others to hear so they can support you or can join in celebrating with you. I ask you to use this time with deep intention and to respect the time we have together to share briefly, knowing that details can come in one-on-one conversations and knowing this is not the time for general announcements. Each of us is going through this day and the days to come, holding a multitude of joys and sorrows. We never know what another is experiencing in a given moment. So this sharing also reminds us to always treat others with loving kindness. If you are attending by Zoom and have a joy or sorrow to share, please raise your hand either virtually using the Zoom reactions or physically if your camera is on. Michael will call on you and ask you to unmute yourself. So we begin with the online folks. Is there anyone there?
Yes, there's the Danielsons. I'm going to unmute them.
Okay.
Hi. Yesterday. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Yesterday was Margot Julian's celebration of life here at Alegria Village. It was delayed a little bit because the family from California were fogged in and many of them came several days later than when they had anticipated. And her best friend and executor of her will was unable to make the celebration, but we were able to join them for dinner last evening. And Ariana from the church there was in attendance, as were Ted and I and Don and Barbara Wallace. I was very surprised that more people did not show up to her celebration of life. Thank you, Priscilla. Anybody else online? Hey, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share a sorrow that you may have heard. My aunt, Florine Mark, died on last Friday, the 13th, and we celebrated her life. Many people in Michigan celebrated her life, which was a blessing and a life well lived.
Thank you, Josh. Anybody else? I don't see anyone else online.
So if you're with us in person this morning and would like to share, please make your way up to this microphone. Okay. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. I light one more candle for those things not yet shared, for the challenges and blessings you may be holding in your hearts. Amen. Okay. And our next hymn is number 1069 from Singing the STJ, the Blue Manual. An ancient mother and traditional Navajo prayer. You're invited to rise and body your spirit as you are willing and able.
Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I feel your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your tears. Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I feel your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your tears.
Okay, our reading is taken from Obedience to the Heavenly Vision by Mary Safford. We must realize our debt to the past, a debt that we cannot pay save by being brave and true and helpful in the present. Ask not, is it a fashionable church? Is it a popular church? Is it a wealthy church? Ask only, is it a church that proves the right to be by the grand truths it proclaims, the good work that it does, the noble lives it helps create? Heed no ignoble questionings about popularity, wealth, or fashion, but obey your heavenly vision. Be loyal to the truth you see, bravely stand by your convictions, and work for the human good. Then life will grow divine. And then we have another hymn. Oh. Okay. Oh. Yes, you were invited to, for the next hymn, you were invited to rise in body or spirit to join in singing hymn number 301 from Singing the Living Tradition, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky.
I think this might be a new one for you guys, so I'll play through the melody once. Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, faith a quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask a reason why. And by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Night's the time left in between to follow a star, to build a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high. Spirits joining as we fly, to touch the earth, to reach the sky.
Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello from Southern California. I'm Pastor Joshua Berg. I'm delighted to be here and pronounce he, him, his. I'm so glad that Jim Moyer shared the story about his grandparents, or that one of those first pictures will sort of set the scene for what I'm going to talk about. Um, a house in the Midwest. And I'll set the scene again visually for this sermon, by taking you on a bit of a sensory journey back to then, a little before then, the end of the 19th century, the late 1800s. So imagine, if you will, a white woman Unitarian minister. She's in an older, once colorful, now faded Victorian house, standing in seas of cornfields, and she's in her favorite chair. She is one of the first women of either the Unitarian or Universalist denominations to ever be ordained. She and her sister Unitarian ministers, known as the Iowa Sisterhood, are spreading Unitarianism through the rural Midwest. And by the way, Unitarians and Universalists both ordained women far before any other tradition. So they're out there in the Midwest spreading Unitarianism, these Iowa Sisterhood. In fact, it was so common to have a female Unitarian minister in the Midwest at this time in the late 1800s that a child in the pews commented when a visiting preacher came, just shouted in surprise, "Mommy, look, there's a man preacher." That's how common women preachers in Unitarian churches were in the Midwest at the time. So back to the Victorian house. The morning sun streams in the window. It warms her as it reawakens the musty odors of home and hearth. Try and sense that. Her spirit is elevated by the colors from a stained glass of an Art Nouveau clerestory window in her home. But she remembers imagining this light from this window when she was a child as an angel's eyes coming through the pews of her parents' church. That's where the window originally was placed, and it was given to her by her own congregation in honor of service when they built a new modern congregational home. So she gathers her energy in this house in cornfields, gathers the energy of the angel's light from the clerestory window, and she rises as sweat draws down her back, connecting her to her own body deep below the high chiffon collar and the tight corset and the multiple laminations of her heavy velvet frock, much like what one of Jim's ancestors was wearing in that picture. She straightens her clothes and she walks to the door and she opens it. And she's immediately gifted with the minty oregano scent of wild bergamot growing in the yard. I painted this picture so you can imagine a Sunday morning in the Midwest territory of a young America right before the turn of the 20th century. In the urban centers of the East, however, Boston and the other urban centers of the East, transformed by the Industrial Revolution at this time, Unitarianism leadership was entirely male-led. But here in the rural expanses of the American frontier, it is women ministers who are doing the arduous work of spreading the faith. Without equal pay or equal recognition, they are guided by their values, their Unitarian values, and motivated by the promise, as we heard, of the heavenly vision of liberal religion. The minister we are imagining now, representative minister, so she surprises herself with a long sigh as she breathes out the work week, and she steps through the portico of her home, reset and enlivened, anticipating her charge to feed the spirits of her flock with worship of what their newly adopted Unitarian statement of faith named the love with which our souls commune. And today, that same love named then is described yet again in the UUA's newest Article 2 proposed revision, and also in our 8 principles. To worship this love, it serves us well to commune with our ancestors, our heritage, those souls of our ancestors who sowed the seeds for our faith's growth. So according to their statement of faith, they believe that reason and conscience are final authorities in matters of religious belief. They believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion, counting nothing good for self that is not good for all. And as previously stated, they worshiped one and all that love with which our souls commune. Once again, these same sentiments align with our current Unitarian Universalist principles. And if we also align with the spirit of strength and of courage and of perseverance of the likes of the Iowa Sisterhood, of Reverends Mary Safford, Caroline Bartlett Crane, of Florence Buck, of Marion Murdoch, of Eleanor Gordon, all the Iowa Sisterhood, we too can cultivate new sacred territory. Now, in the 21st century, as we rise in our homes, we are them. They are us. I am this preacher whose sage words will nourish her congregation. You are the congregant and the lay leader who works against all odds to support our beloved faith as the country grows. So connecting directly into that home, realizing they had challenges too, were fallible as well, and they faced each new day just as we do. That facilitates an ability to travel with them in spirit. It enables us to know that if they did the work which they did, we too have the capacity to do the work that must be done. Now, it may seem our struggles are very different from the Iowa Sisterhood, and many are, but certain struggles we still confront over a century later. We also must recognize that the day this particular minister left for worship was only a few years following Supreme Court rulings legalizing segregation, slavery in yet another incarnation, despite the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation, and perpetuating America's long-established caste system. We also cannot forget that the very moment this minister anticipated the first hymn of her beloved worship, the Code of Indian Offenses forbade Indigenous Americans from practicing their religion at all. So we honor the contributions of the Iowa Sisterhood to our faith as pioneers only with direct recognition of the fact that they too were colonizers. Notwithstanding the spreading of the Unitarian faith itself, even still evolving into a more just faith, was filled with a sense of excitement and adventure. And I do believe we can tap into a similar energy. Just as the Iowa Sisterhood confronted the physical frontier with the charge to tenaciously build homesteads of Unitarian faith as they envisioned them, we too are setting out into an unknown expanse today. It is one with as much risk of danger, yet also just as much or more fertile spiritual soil in which to support life and foster love. Between 1880 and 1930, the 21 women of the Iowa Sisterhood changed the course of Unitarianism by building churches and promoting a theology of universal love and justice. If we harness the tenacity of the Iowa Sisterhood, we can move the needle even further. We can shepherd our faith into a future that will see our country and our world and Unitarian Universalism grow and prosper, transformed also by breeding liberation for all. There's yet another sobering lesson to this story, however. After the Iowa Sisterhood worked for decades to build the faith with numerous new congregations and parishioners, The denominational leaders in the East pilfered their gains and squandered their talents. Imagine again the same minister we pictured before, rising on a Sunday, now 20 years later. The bergamot still blooms, nature's still there, yet it fails to uplift her spirit because she is now climbing into a Model T, perhaps, wearing a 1920s cloche hat and a much lighter dress, thankfully, but also has a much heavier heart. She is keenly aware that the country's ills are being blamed on cultural emasculation, and especially within the Unitarian denomination, there is a growing desire to regain a supposed lost virility to prevent any further adverse impact from feminism. And the leadership of the American Unitarian Association was opposed at this time to filling vacancies, new vacancies with women ministers. There were still men of rank who supported the Iowa Sisterhood, like Jenkins Lloyd Jones, for instance, who worked tirelessly on their behalf. He was an ancestor, actually, of Frank Lloyd Wright. But they were also being driven out, these men. And consequently, the Iowa Sisterhood redirected their passion for justice through faith away from the church. The Unitarians lost them. They continued their theologically supported work for freedom and love, eventually helping to achieve significant legislative and societal reform. Only now they did so without the continued support and in spite of new obstacles presented by the very faith that benefited for decades from their selfless toil. So for Unitarian Universalism to grow and thrive, we cannot make these same mistakes. As a faith community, we must nurture and promote those leading us in transformative change, regardless of how it challenges tradition or challenges those of us with privilege. And we must call out instances of marginalization and discrimination, whether by national leadership, ministers, or congregants. The work that frees us all will also put many ill at ease. We of privilege specifically must lose our fragility and nurture all ministries that persevere in the face of the difficult and painful process of bending along with the arc of the moral universe. This is not to say that white people like myself, that men, that people of privilege are not wanted or needed or cannot be leaders of our faith. They are, and they can. It is to say that the Unitarian Universalist faith needs every one of us, of all genders, identities, social locations, all of us as unequivocally equal. And that requires opening space as the modern day incarnation of the Iowa Sisterhood, as our Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders take their rightful places as equals and as leaders. Further, I believe anyone can be the 21st century transformer doing the unrelenting work of liberation through faith. No, we're not all ordained ministers or eloquent orators or skilled organizers and managers, shepherds of congregational growth. But we're diverse. We're from assorted social locations with various lived experiences and levels of privilege. And however, since our collective Unitarian Universalist theology, being one of the priesthood of all believers, means that regardless of how we identify or our individual talents, we are all ministers. It's just for us to attend to our individual inspiration where our personal ministry lies. We are still a predominantly white faith, swimming in the culture we have inherited, the legacy of hundreds of years of white supremacy, with all the prejudice and inequity that brings. The transformative change that manifested as the female ministry of the Iowa Sisterhood, challenging patriarchy, now takes the form of the vital anti-racist and other liberationist ministries challenging oppression that is both intentional and unintentional, overt and covert. Unitarian Universalism in the 21st century will only succeed by supporting the myriad of anti-racist, anti-bigotry, liberative ministries, and all inspired transformative ministries wherever and however they exist. Because as a denomination, we are the ministers with marginalized identities on the pulpit, in the pews, participating in small groups and occupying every space of our organization, taking the lead in dismantling white supremacy culture. And we are also the white allies, harnessing our privilege to support that effort in various ways. And we are also the committee members who fight for initiatives against all odds. We are the board governors who shape the mission guided by a combination of fiscal responsibility and liberation theology. We are the community ministers that treat our earth with no less love than we have for our children. We are the youth who will tolerate nothing less than a truly equitable society. We are congregants from all backgrounds who believe in the liberating power of sacred worship and ritual. We are all, every one of us in our own way, the shepherds of this faith. Reverend Mary Safford proclaimed that the liberal church is to be obedient to its heavenly vision. Not only must we proclaim the saving truths we hold, but we must also strive to build up these truths in our lives and in the lives of others. That's her quote. This was a call to which the Iowa Sisterhood dedicated their lives. We can fulfill that call in the 21st century and beyond if we are obedient to the earthly vision to which we dedicate our lives. So let's travel back to that first image in 1889. That minister leaving her house boarded her carriage bound for her congregation, where she will build our denomination. Honor her struggle and her accomplishments as you too rise to proclaim the saving truths we hold and build up these truths in your life, in the lives of others. If we promote and nurture the ministries that uplift us, the ministries that challenge us, and the ministries that liberate us, we can lead the world into an equitable future of love with which all souls can indeed commune. You are invited to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn 1051, We Are, words and music by Isaiah M. Barneswell.
For he shall that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For he shall that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Okay, our chalice extinguishing today is responsive, so just repeat after me whatever I say. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope,
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope,
the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And for our benediction, I'm going to quote another of the Iowa Sisterhood, Reverend Eleanor Gordon, followed by a modern day prophet of love, Bell Hooks. Reverend Eleanor Gordon writes, "We pass in review the history of humanity. We trace step by step the steady gain of the true, the good, and the beautiful. Our hearts thrill in response to the brave deeds of the past, throb with exultation as we learn more of the devotion of patriot, of the heroism of reformer and martyr, more of the earnestness of saint, prophet, and poet. As we read of what they did, we know that we cannot win what they succeeded in winning. And yet, in the presence of their success and proud achievement, in dignified humility, we recognize our kinship. And each can say, I too am a human soul. I too am a child of God. I too am an heir of all that has been won. I stand in the long line of succession and claim as my own all that I am worthy to have, to hold." And here are some quotes from Bell Hooks. "We do not have to love, we choose to love. When we understand love as the will to nurture our own and another's spiritual growth, it becomes clear that we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Everywhere we learn that love is important, and yet we are bombarded by its failure. This bleak picture in no way alters the nature of our longing. We still hope that love will prevail. We still believe in love's promise. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. I write of love to bear witness both to the danger in this movement today and to call for a return to love." And now our postlude.
Melt
let's try this again.